According to Reporters Sans Frontières, South Africa is number 32 on the list of countries with the greatest press freedom. We've slipped down one place from 31 last year. Nordic countries have the most press freedom. That's according to Reporters Sans Frontières. And North Korea and Eritrea are at the bottom of the list. World Press Freedom Days had its origins in Windhoek 30 years ago to UNESCO conference in 1991. Well, let's talk now about press freedom on our continent. Two journalists are joining us. Tetteh Zindoga is from Harare in Zimbabwe, and the activist and journalist Sangmorkie is in Accra in Ghana. Tetteh, good evening. I'm going to start with you. You've been reporting, in fact, on journalists in Zimbabwe being arrested. You had to report on your colleague, Hopewell Chinono, being arrested. It must be very, very difficult to report as a journalist in Zimbabwe right now.
Oh yeah, the situation in the country has been far from ideal, but we can say that in the past year, it's been a mixed bag. We saw a lot of repression to the extent that the Media Institute of Southern Africa documented up to close to 100 infractions against journalists, and we saw obviously the high-profile arrest of Hopewell Chinono, who spent close to 3 months cumulatively, for doing his work as a journalist. And there was generally a climate of fear because of the arrest, the high-profile arrest of Hopewell Chinono, as well as the state of emergency. You see that during a state of emergency, such as one that was imposed during the lockdown, empowers authorities to sometimes make arbitrary use of force. And we saw that a number of journalists fell foul of those regulations. Some were beaten, some were harassed, some were bundled into trucks, police trucks, and so forth, which really was a climate of fear. But the irony really is that I must acknowledge that, on the other hand, the government itself, through the Ministry of Information, the Minister, the Permanent Secretary, made a lot of interventions, personally, sometimes through their offices, to rescue journalists as it were, and to intervene where especially journalists were within the crosshairs of overzealous police officers and other law enforcers. But also in 2020, we saw a number of milestones regarding the repeal of the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which was notorious, by the way, for the last 20 or so years for constricting the media space and even not allowing the practice by journalists freely to do their work. So it was a mixed bag, really, but the big blot on the press and press freedom was the arrest and incarceration and persecution, indeed, of Hopewell Chinono.
And Sangmorkie Tetteh in Ghana, I mean, what happens when people in your country try and report on wrongdoing, try and report on government officials?
For us, it is generally a free press. However, there are a bit of hitches here and there, so I would like to elaborate on that. First and foremost, especially during the lockdown period, journalists were attacked by some of the police officers and some security personnel in the course of their duty. I think that there was not fine communication there, so that's led to the attacks. So we had the Ghana Journalists Association coming out with some statements calling for some sort of order. Generally, we report in a peaceful atmosphere, but I think that people do not really understand the role of the press. Aside government, individuals and companies as well do not understand the role of the press. And so whenever we try to get information, they think we are intruding. This, in recent times, should even have been said to have stopped because of the passage of the Rights to Information Bill into law now. So in 2019, after over 10 years, the Right to Information Bill was finally passed into law. Its implementation has been the problem, as can be said for most of our laws in the country. We have the laws, but implementing them becomes a problem. Journalists do not even understand how to go about it. Some of the issues governing retrieval of information from government entities. And so all these things come to play when we are talking about freedom of the press in our country, Ghana.
Teacher, I mean, in Zimbabwe, do people try and use the internet to report? Does that work? Are you able to use, things like Twitter to report on what is actually happening? Or do you find that, I mean, in the case of Hopewell Chinono, people get arrested for doing that anyway?
Yeah. I think right now the internet is a more democratic space. People from all walks of life are enjoying the freeness that comes with the internet. So we have had a huge influx of citizen journalists. People generally are free, but some politically exposed people and some high-profile figures sometimes are hunted, surveilled upon, and otherwise harassed for doing their work. But
we seem to be losing the sound there from Teacher Zindoga in Zimbabwe, a journalist there. Let's return to Sangmorkie Tetteh. Sangmorkie, I mean, when officials try and refuse to give you information or try and take action against a journalist, do citizens support journalism? Do you find that people actually support journalists in your country?
In my country, largely, I would say that it's 50-50. Because our country is highly politicized, we have two political divides mainly. So if you are reporting and they see that the issue favors them, their side, then they will support you. If it favors the other side, then they think that you are part of this side. So, for example, that we have two main political parties, NDC and MPP. That's the New Patriotic Party, which is ruling now, and then the National Democratic Congress, which was ruling us some years back. So if you are a journalist and you are reporting and maybe there is an issue concerning the National Democratic Congress, the supporters of the NDC think that you are MPP. And so you cannot write anything freely without being tagged. And that is the major problem we face here. Issues come up as a journalist, you report from a neutral angle, and it is still skewed into a certain direction as being politicized, and then that is the major problem we face from the masses over here. If only they could see that we are just neutrals reporting as it should be, but everybody eats from politicians, for want of a better phrase, and so then all the time your report is seen as being one-sided, sort of. That's how they want to see it, and that's how it is. We are trying to make them understand that information is there. We have to go for the information. If you look at the Ghana Journalists Association, the Code of Ethics, the public interest is key. It is number 3 on our Code of Ethics, that we must ensure that everything we do is in support of public interest or in the interest of the public. However, they don't see it as such. Also, let me touch on ownership of the media in Ghana, which is now a big problem. I think that is what is not helping us at all as media, ownership. So most media houses are owned by individuals who are politicians or have political affiliations. So we have NDC having its media houses, we have MPP having its media houses, which obviously does not ensure the neutrality that we hope to achieve as journalists. And so if you are working with a media house that is owned by a politician, obviously your reportage will not go well with the other side, and of course you will not be neutral. It is very difficult to be neutral. Some of us have worked in media houses that have a little political affiliation, not even 100%. But then if you write, people think that it's skewed towards a little aesthetic side. And even when you try to be neutral, you get a few calls here and there trying to interfere in your work. So it's a bit of a problem when it comes to ownership. With COVID too, I think funding of media houses has become a problem in terms of journalists writing for media houses. And so some journalists are compromised here and there, you can tell from the way they report. And these are all issues that the GJA is trying to address. It's not been easy, but they are trying. I think we need to speed up because we've had freedom of the press since 2001 when our criminal libel law was repealed. Until date, now with the support of the RTI law, I think we should do better than we are doing now.
And such an interesting question, such a series of difficulties that you put. Let's go back to Zimbabwe and Teacher Zindoga there. I mean, Teacher, our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has said that he supports South African journalists. He supports South African journalism. In fact, today he praised South African journalists. Would it help if he intervened in situations when Zimbabwean journalists are arrested just for doing their job?
I'm sorry, can you take the question again? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Would it help if our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, intervened when journalists in Zimbabwe are arrested?
I think that's to take it too far. I'm sure it will be unconscionable and unheard of. But I think journalists themselves and journalist bodies locally, regionally, and internationally have to stand up for Zimbabwean journalists within the profession. And the profession itself has to have certain fundamentals. The ideology of journalism that means that they support their own. I don't think political intervention at the level of state.
Right, we're going to leave that there, I'm afraid, losing the sound from the journalist Tichaona Zindoga from Harare in Zimbabwe, and then the activist and journalist Sangmorkie Tetteh in Accra in Ghana. More to come.